Victor Canada stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, his reflection ghosting against the New York City skyline. The setting sun painted the glass and steel buildings in hues of gold and amber, a fitting backdrop for a man who had spent his life pursuing wealth and success. At 52, Victor had achieved everything he'd ever dreamed of, and more. As CEO of the great American hotel chain, he commanded an empire that spanned the country, with properties in every major city. Yet, as he stood there in his bespoke Armani suit, a glass of 30-year-old Macallan in hand, Victor felt a hollowness that no amount of success could fill. The office, with its Italian leather chairs, antique mahogany desk, and priceless modern art, suddenly felt suffocating. He loosened his Hermes tie, a small act of rebellion against the life he'd built. The intercom buzzed, his assistant's voice cutting through the silence. "Mr. Canada, your car is ready for the charity gala." Victor sighed, downing the last of his scotch. The burn in his throat was a welcome distraction from the gnawing emptiness. Another night, another event where he'd plaster on a smile and make small talk with people who only saw his bank account. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the elevator, nodding mechanically at employees who scurried out of his way like mice avoiding a cat. In the back of his Bentley, Victor found himself staring at his reflection in the tinted window. Gray hair at his temples, lines etched around his eyes. When had he gotten so old? More importantly, when had he last felt truly alive? He couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed genuinely, or felt a real connection with another person. The gala was a blur of champagne flutes, forced laughter, and hollow compliments. As he shook hands and posed for photos, Victor felt like an actor in a play, reciting lines he'd long since memorized. The weight of his facade was crushing, each smile and pleasantry adding another brick to the wall he'd built around himself. It wasn't until he overheard a conversation between two guests that something shifted inside him. "Have you stayed at the Grand Dakota recently?" one woman asked, her voice carrying a hint of disdain. Victor's ears perked up. The Grand Dakota was the crown jewel of his empire, the hotel that had started it all for his family 3 generations ago. "Oh, it's fine," her companion replied with a shrug. "But nothing special. Just another big chain hotel, if you ask me. No personality, no charm. You might as well be staying in any generic high-rise." The words hit Victor like a punch, to the gut. Is that what people thought of his life's work? Just another soulless corporation? He excused himself from his current conversation and made his way to the bar, ordering a double scotch. As he sipped the amber liquid, the chatter of the gala faded into white noise, replaced by a roaring in his ears. He thought back to his grandfather, who had founded the Great American with a single hotel in Chicago. He remembered the stories of personal service, of guests who returned year after year because they felt like family. When had that spirit been lost? When had the Great American become just another faceless chain? As his driver took him home that night, Victor made a decision that would change everything. He needed to see the Grand Dakota through fresh eyes, not as the owner, not as the CEO, but as a guest. It was time to go undercover in his own hotel. The next morning, Victor called an emergency meeting with his executive team. He announced that he'd be taking a leave of absence for personal reasons, leaving his trusted COO, Jack Dossauer, in charge. The looks of shock and concern on their faces almost made him reconsider. But Victor's mind was made up. "But sir," his CFO protested, "the quarterly report is due in 3 weeks, and we have the board meeting." Victor cut him off with a wave of his hand. "Jack can handle it. I need this time away. I'll be reachable in case of emergencies. But otherwise, I don't want to be disturbed." As the team filed out, Jack lingered behind. "Victor, are you sure about this? It's not like you to step away." Victor met his friend's concerned gaze. "I'm sure, Jack. Something's missing, and I need to figure out what it is. I trust you to keep things running smoothly." Over the next few days, Victor worked with a private security firm to craft a new identity. Alex Mexico, a mid-level marketing executive from Chicago, with a few subtle changes to his appearance, letting his salt and pepper stubble grow, trading his designer suits for off-the-rack business casual, and adding a pair of non-prescription glasses. Victor became Alex, as he packed a single, suitcase with clothes he'd never worn before. Victor felt a thrill he hadn't experienced in years. For the first time in decades, he was stepping into the unknown. He was terrified, he was exhilarated, he was finally breaking free from his gilded cage. The night before his departure, Victor stood once again at the windows of his penthouse. But this time, instead of seeing a reflection of his success, he saw possibility stretching out before him. He thought about the conversation he'd overheard at the gala, about the legacy his grandfather had built, about the kind of leader and person he wanted to be. As the city lights twinkled below, Victor made a silent promise to himself and to the memory of his grandfather. He would rediscover the heart of the great American, no matter what it took, and perhaps, along the way, he might rediscover himself as well. The yellow taxi pulled up to the grand entrance of the Grand Dakota, and Victor, now Alex, felt a flutter of nerves in his stomach. He'd driven past this building countless times, but never like this. Never as just another guest. The imposing facade of the historic hotel loomed before him, its Art Deco details gleaming in the morning sun. As the doorman approached to help with his luggage, Victor had to resist the urge to greet him by name. Instead, he fumbled with his wallet, unsure of the proper tipping etiquette. The doorman's polite smile never wavered, but Victor caught a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "Welcome to the Grand Dakota, sir," the doorman said, gesturing towards the revolving doors. "Enjoy your stay." Victor nodded, trying to channel the slightly awkward energy of Alex Mexico. He stepped into the lobby, and for a moment, he forgot to breathe. The soaring ceilings, the gleaming marble floors, the cascading crystal chandelier. He'd designed every inch of this space, but seeing it now, as a guest, it was like experiencing it for the first time. Yet, as he looked closer, he noticed things he'd never seen before. A small crack in one of the marble tiles, a slightly crooked painting on the wall, a guest struggling with an overflowing luggage cart while staff members chatted nearby, oblivious to her plight. At the front desk, a young woman with a name tag reading Sarah greeted him with a practiced smile. "Good afternoon, sir. Do you have a reservation?" "Yes, Alex Mexico," Victor said, the false name still feeling foreign on his tongue. He handed over his ID and credit card, half expecting to be recognized. But Sarah simply processed his check-in with cheerful efficiency. "You're in room 1217, Mr. Mexico," she said, handing him a key card. "That's on our club level, which includes access to our executive lounge. The elevators are just to your right. Is there anything else I can help you with?" Victor shook his head, mumbling a thank you as he headed for the elevators. As he waited, he overheard a couple complaining about the wait time. His fingers itched to pull out his phone and call maintenance, but he forced himself to stay in character. Instead, he observed how other guests reacted, noting the looks of frustration and impatience that flitted across their faces. The elevator ride was silent and awkward, with guests studiously avoiding eye contact. Victor realized he'd never really paid attention to this part of the guest experience before. Was this the norm in his hotels? People packed together like sardines, deliberately ignoring each other's existence. The room was exactly as he'd specified in the design plans, spacious, with a king-size bed, a sitting area, and a view of Central Park. But as Victor explored, he noticed things he'd never considered before. The TV remote was complicated to use, with buttons for services that no longer existed. The air conditioning unit made a faint but persistent humming noise that he knew would become annoying over time. And why were there so many pillows on the bed? He counted 8, each a different size and firmness. It seemed excessive and wasteful. Determined to fully embrace the guest experience, Victor decided to order room service. He picked up the phone, only to be met with a recorded message about the hotel's new mobile app for in-room dining. Frustrated, he dug out his phone and downloaded the app, which then crashed twice before he could place his order. As he waited for his meal, Victor wandered the room, opening drawers and testing the water pressure in the shower. He found himself making mental notes of improvements, more accessible outlets, better lighting in the bathroom, a simpler TV system. He realized with a start that he'd fallen into CEO mode and forced himself to step back. He was here to experience, not to critique. A knock at the door announced the arrival of his dinner. The waiter, a young man named Carlos, wheeled in a cart with Victor's meal. As Carlos set up the table, Victor attempted some small talk. "So, how long have you worked here?" he asked, wincing internally at how forced it sounded. Carlos paused, seeming surprised by the question. "About 2 years now, sir. It's a good place to work." Victor nodded, searching for something else to say. "And, do you like it? Working here, I mean?" A guarded look crossed Carlos's face. "Yes, sir, it's fine. Will there be anything else?" Victor shook his head, and Carlos left quickly, leaving Victor feeling more out of place than ever. He sat down to his meal, a perfectly cooked steak that somehow tasted bland, and realized just how much he had to learn about the day-to-day reality of his hotels. That night, as he lay in the too soft bed, surrounded by too many pillows, Victor stared at the ceiling, his mind racing. He'd thought he knew everything about his hotels, but this single day had shown him how much he'd been missing. The small inefficiencies, the lack of personal connection, the overall sense of corporate blandness. It all added up to an experience that was far from the vision his grandfather had started with. He thought about Carlos, about the couple, at the elevators, about Sarah at the front desk. These were the people who brought the Grand Dakota to life every day. Yet he, the CEO, had been completely disconnected from their reality. How could he lead a hospitality company when he'd forgotten what hospitality truly meant? As sleep finally claimed him, one thought echoed in Victor's mind. What else would he discover in the days to come? And more importantly, what would he do with that knowledge? The next morning, Victor woke early, his body clock still set to CEO time despite his new persona. He decided to explore the hotel's fitness center, curious to see how guests utilized the facilities he'd spent millions designing and equipping. As he approached the gym, he noticed a flurry of activity in one of the smaller conference rooms. Peeking inside, he saw a woman with auburn hair pulled into a messy bun, directing a team of staff members as they arranged chairs and tables. Her energy and focus were palpable, drawing Victor in despite himself. Little did he know, this chance encounter would be the catalyst for changes that would reshape not just the Grand Dakota, but Victor's entire world. Victor lingered in the doorway of the conference room, watching the auburn-haired woman in action. Her voice was firm but kind as she directed her team. No, the sponsors' banners need to be more visible," she was saying. "Let's move them to the left of the stage. And can someone please check on the AV setup? The keynote speaker will be here in 3 hours, and I want everything perfect." There was something compelling about her energy and competence. Without thinking, Victor stepped into the room. "Excuse me," he said, slipping into his Alex persona. "Is there anything I can help with?" The woman turned, surprise flickering across her face before being replaced by a warm smile. "That's very kind of you, but we've got it under control. Are you here for the conference?" Victor hesitated, then decided to roll with it. "No, just a curious guest. I'm in marketing, so I always find these setups interesting. I'm Alex, by the way." "Emma," she replied, shaking his hand. "Emma, Texas. I'm the events coordinator here at the Grand Dakota." As they talked, Victor was struck by Emma's passion for her job. She spoke about the upcoming medical conference with genuine excitement, detailing the challenges and rewards of coordinating such a large event. "It's all about the details," she explained, leading Victor on an impromptu tour of the setup. Making sure the lighting is just right, that the catering meets everyone's dietary needs, that the schedule runs smoothly. When everything comes together, it's like magic. Victor found himself fascinated, not just by the behind-the-scenes glimpse of hotel operations, but by Emma herself. She was probably in her mid-40s, with laugh lines around her eyes, and a no-nonsense attitude that he found refreshing. Her hands moved animatedly as she spoke, and Victor noticed a simple silver band on her left ring finger. "So, Alex," Emma said as they finished the tour, "what brings you to the Grand Dakota, business or pleasure?" "A bit of both," Victor replied, surprised by how easily the lie came. "I'm taking some time to reassess things. Thought a change of scenery might help." Emma nodded understandingly. "Well, you picked a good place for it. This hotel has a way of putting things in perspective." As they parted ways, Victor felt a spark of connection he hadn't experienced in years. Emma was more than just an employee. She was the heart of the hotel, bringing events to life with her creativity and dedication. Throughout the day, Victor found himself thinking about Emma and the passion she brought to her work. He attended a session of the medical conference, ostensibly to learn about new marketing strategies in healthcare, but really to watch Emma in action. She moved through the crowd with ease, solving problems before they arose and ensuring everyone's needs were met. As he observed, Victor couldn't help but compare Emma's hands-on approach to his own detached management style. When was the last time he'd actually walked the floors of one of his hotels, talking to staff and guests? When had he lost touch with the day-to-day operations that were the lifeblood of his business? That evening, as Victor sat alone in the hotel bar, nursing a whiskey and pondering all he'd learned, he spotted Emma entering. She looked tired but satisfied, no doubt coming off a successful day of event management. Without overthinking it, Victor waved her over. "Looks like the conference was a hit," he said as she approached. Emma's face lit up with a genuine smile. "It was, though I'm certainly ready for a drink. Mind if I join you?" As they talked, Victor found himself opening up in a way he hadn't in years. He spoke about his career frustrations and his search for meaning, carefully editing his story to fit the Alex persona. Emma listened attentively, offering insights and sharing her own experiences. "You know," she said after a while, "sometimes the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in service to others. That's what I love about this job. Every day, I get to create experiences that people will remember for a lifetime." Victor nodded, feeling a mix of admiration and guilt, and he'd always seen the hotel as a business, a series of numbers on a spreadsheet. Emma saw it as a living, breathing entity that touched people's lives. As they said goodnight, Victor realized that his undercover mission had taken an unexpected turn. He'd come to learn about his hotel, but instead, he was learning about himself. And Emma, Texas, with her passion and perspective, was becoming a key part of that journey. Walking back to his room, Victor felt a sense of anticipation he hadn't experienced in years. For the first time in a long time, he was genuinely excited to see what tomorrow would bring. The following morning, Victor woke with a renewed sense of purpose. He was determined to experience every aspect of the Grand Dakota from a guest's perspective. After a quick breakfast in the club lounge, where he overheard mixed reviews about the selection and service, he set out to explore the hotel's amenities. His first stop was the spa, a feature he'd always touted in marketing materials but had never actually used himself. As he approached the reception desk, a young woman with a serene smile greeted him. "Good morning, sir. Welcome to Serenity Spa. Do you have an appointment?" Victor hesitated. "No, I was hoping to book a massage, if that's possible." The receptionist's smile never wavered, but Victor noticed a flicker of something, annoyance, perhaps, in her eyes. "Of course, sir. Let me check our availability." She tapped away at her computer for what felt like an eternity. "We have an opening in 3 hours. Would that work for you?" Victor agreed, mentally noting the long wait time. He spent the next few hours wandering, the hotelier observing guests and staff alike. In the business center, he watched a frazzled executive struggle with a malfunctioning printer, while a bored-looking attendant scrolled through his phone. At the concierge desk, he overheard a couple complaining about the difficulty of getting restaurant reservations, the concierge's forced smile barely masking her frustration. When it was time for his spa appointment, Victor found himself on a massage table, face down and feeling surprisingly vulnerable. The massage itself was excellent, the therapist's skilled hands working out knots he didn't even know he had. But he couldn't help noticing the peeling paint in one corner of the ceiling, or the faint sound of a vacuum cleaner from somewhere nearby. These small imperfections nagged at him, reminders of the gap between the luxury image, the Grand Dakota projected, and the reality of its day-to-day operations. After the spa, Victor decided to try the hotel's renowned restaurant, the Golden Fork. He'd hired the chef himself, a rising star in the culinary world, and was eager to see if the food lived up to the hype. As he waited for a table, Victor struck up a conversation with an elderly couple who were regulars at the restaurant. "Oh, it used to be marvelous," the woman said, her voice tinged with nostalgia. "But lately, it's just not the same. The service is slower. The menu never changes. It's lost its spark, if you ask me." Victor felt a pang of disappointment as he was finally seated. The meal that followed was good, but not great. The steak was slightly overcooked. The wine list was impressive but overpriced, and his waiter, while polite, seemed rushed and distracted. As he finished his dessert, a deconstructed cheesecake that was more style than substance, Victor found himself longing for a simple, home-cooked meal. The opulence that had once been a point of pride now felt hollow and impersonal. Returning to his room, Victor was surprised to find Emma waiting near the elevators, looking harried. "Alex? Thank goodness," she said, relief evident in her voice. "I hate to ask, but we're in a bit of a crisis. Our keynote speaker for tomorrow's session is stuck in Chicago due to weather. I don't suppose you'd be willing to fill in, just a short talk on marketing trends or something similar." Victor felt a moment of panic. Public speaking as Victor Canada was one thing, but as Alex Mexico. Yet the pleading look in Emma's eyes made it impossible to refuse. Sure, I can try," he heard himself saying. "What time tomorrow?" Emma's face lit up with gratitude. "You're a lifesaver. The session starts at 10 a.m. I'll email you the details. Thank you so much, Alex." As Emma hurried off, Victor leaned against the wall, his mind racing. He'd come here to observe, to learn, not to participate. But as he thought about the day's experiences, he realized that this might be exactly what he needed. A chance to not just see the hotel through a guest's eyes, but to actively engage with it in a new way. Back in his room, Victor spent hours preparing his presentation, drawing on his years of experience but framing it from the perspective of a mid-level marketing executive. As he worked, he found himself energized in a way he hadn't felt in years. The challenge of stepping outside his comfort zone, of presenting himself as someone else, was both terrifying and exhilarating. As he finally crawled into bed in the early hours of the morning, Victor reflected on how much he'd learned in just 2 days. The Grand Dakota, his pride and joy, was showing its age. The service, while generally good, lacked the personal touch that had once set it apart. And yet, there was still something special about this place, something he was only now beginning to truly understand. With thoughts of Emma's grateful smile and the daunting task ahead of him, Victor drifted off to sleep, ready to face whatever challenges the next day might bring. Victor woke early, his nerves jangling at the prospect of giving a presentation as Alex Mexico. He dressed carefully in his most professional Alex outfit, a navy blazer over a light blue button-down shirt and khaki slacks, and headed down to the conference room, rehearsing key points in his head. To his surprise, Emma was already there, looking fresh despite the early hour. She greeted him with a warm smile and a cup of coffee. "Alex, you're a lifesaver. How are you feeling?" "Nervous," Victor admitted, taking a sip of the perfectly prepared coffee. The rich aroma helped calm his nerves slightly. "It's been a while since I've spoken in front of a crowd." Emma squeezed his arm reassuringly. "You'll do great. Just be yourself." The irony of her words wasn't lost on Victor as he took the stage. The room was packed with medical professionals, their faces a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Victor took a deep breath, reminding himself that he was Alex Mexico, mid-level marketing executive, not Victor Canada, CEO. But as he began to speak, something unexpected happened. Freed from the constraints of being Victor Canada, he found himself more relaxed and engaging than he'd been in years. He shared anecdotes about marketing campaigns that had resonated with consumers on an emotional level, cracked jokes about the challenges of reaching a digital-savvy audience, and connected with the crowd in a way that felt both new and familiar. In the end, he concluded, the most successful marketing doesn't just sell a product or service. It tells a story that people can see themselves in. In healthcare, that story is about hope, about improving lives. Your job as medical professionals is to provide the care. Our job in marketing is to make sure people know that care is available, accessible, and delivered with compassion. When the presentation ended, the applause was genuine and enthusiastic. Emma practically bounced up to him, her eyes shining. "Alex, that was amazing! You really saved the day!" Buoyed by the success and Emma's praise, Victor made an impulsive decision. "How about we celebrate? Are you free for lunch?" Emma hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "You know?" "What, I am. Let me just wrap up a few things here." An hour later, they were strolling through Central Park, hot dogs in hand from a nearby vendor. Victor couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten street food, and the simple pleasure of it was intoxicating. The sun was warm on his face, and the park was alive with the sounds of children playing, dogs barking, and street musicians performing. "So, Alex," Emma said as they found a bench overlooking the lake, "tell me something about yourself that's not on your LinkedIn profile." Victor chuckled, thinking fast. "Well, I once tried to learn the ukulele. Turns out I'm completely tone deaf." Emma laughed, a warm, genuine sound that made Victor's heart skip a beat. "Okay, my turn. I secretly dream of opening a small B&B in Vermont." As they traded, stories and dreams, Victor felt the walls he'd built around himself start to crumble. He found himself sharing hopes and fears he'd never voiced aloud, carefully edited to fit Alex's persona but nonetheless true. "I've always wondered what it would be like to just start over," he confessed. "To walk away from everything and reinvent myself completely." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "I think we all have that fantasy sometimes. But sometimes the bravest thing isn't to run away, but to stay and change things from within." Her words struck a chord with Victor, making him question his entire approach to this undercover mission. Was he really seeking change, or just an escape? The afternoon flew by in a whirlwind of spontaneous adventures. They visited the Central Park Zoo, acting like kids as they made faces at the sea lions. Victor found himself laughing more than he had in years, the weight of his responsibilities temporarily forgotten. They stumbled upon a street performance and danced to the lively jazz, Victor surprising himself with how quickly he picked up the steps Emma showed him. The feeling of her hand in his, the joy on her face as they twirled and laughed, stirred something in Victor that he'd thought long dormant. As the sun began to set, they found themselves in a tiny, hole-in-the-wall Italian restaurant, sharing a plate of the best pasta Victor had ever tasted. The place was nothing like the high-end establishments he usually frequented, but the warmth of the atmosphere and the genuine passion of the owner made the experience unforgettable. Emma said, twirling spaghetti around her fork, "I can't remember the last time I played tourist in my own city. This has been really nice." Victor nodded, a lump forming in his throat. "It has. Thank you, Emma, for everything." As they walked back to the hotel, Victor felt a mix of elation and guilt. He was falling for Emma. Her kindness, her passion, her zest for life. But he was also lying to her with every word, every shared moment. The weight of his deception was starting to overshadow the joy of their connection. Back at the Grand Dakota, they lingered in the lobby, neither wanting the day to end. The space that had seemed so impersonal to Victor just days ago now felt different, infused with the warmth of the memories he'd made with Emma. "Alex," Emma said softly, "I know you're only here for a short time, but would you like to do this again? Maybe tomorrow?" Victor knew he should say no. He was getting in too deep, losing sight of his original mission. But looking into Emma's hopeful eyes, he found he couldn't refuse. "I'd love to," he said, his heart racing. "It's a date." As he rode the elevator back to his room, Victor's mind was in turmoil. He was seeing his hotel and his life through new eyes. And at the center of it all was Emma, a woman who was quickly becoming more important to him than he'd ever imagined possible. He sat on the edge of his bed, head in his hands, the events of the day replaying in his mind. How had he gone from detached CEO to a man on the verge of falling in love in just a few days? And how could he reconcile his growing feelings for Emma with the lie at the heart of their relationship? Victor knew he was at a crossroads. He could continue this charade, deepening his connection with Emma while maintaining his false identity. Or he could come clean, risking everything but opening the door to a genuine relationship. As he grappled with this dilemma, Victor couldn't shake the feeling that whatever choice he made would irrevocably change the course of his life, and potentially the future of the great American hotel chain. The next morning, Victor woke to a flurry of missed calls and urgent messages on his personal phone. Slipping into the bathroom to ensure privacy, he returned the call to his COO, Jack. "Victor, Where the hell have you been? Jack's voice was strained, tension evident in every word. We've got a situation. Platinum Hotels is making a move. They're trying to buy out our major shareholders. Victor felt the blood drain from his face. Platinum Hotels was a ruthless corporation known for hostile takeovers and stripping acquired properties of their unique character. They'd been circling the Great American for years, waiting for the right moment to strike. How bad is it? Victor asked, his mind racing through potential scenarios and countermeasures. Bad. They've already secured commitments from some key players. We're talking about 30% of our shares. Victor. They're moving fast and they're not being subtle about it. The market is buzzing with rumors. Victor closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his dual identities crushing down on him. He thought of Emma, of the day they'd planned together, of the genuine connection he'd felt. Then he thought of his employees, of his family's legacy, of everything he'd worked for. I can't come back just yet, Jack. I need more. Time. Time. Victor, we don't have time. Jack's voice rose in frustration. This is everything your family has built, everything you've worked for. You need to fight. I know, Victor said, trying to keep his voice low. Look, I can handle some things remotely. Set up a secure line for me. Get the legal team working on defensive strategies. I'll call in some favors, see if we can shore up support among the other shareholders. After assuring Jack he'd handle things, Victor ended the call and leaned against the cool tile of the bathroom wall. How had things spiraled so quickly? And how could he fight this battle while maintaining his cover as Alex? A soft knock on the door jolted him back to reality. Alex, are you okay in there? Emma's concerned voice called out. Victor took a deep breath, steeling himself. Yeah, just a minute. He splashed some water on his face and tried to compose himself before opening the door. Emma stood there, looking beautiful in a casual sundress, her face creased with worry. You look pale. Are you feeling all right? Victor forced a smile. Just a bit of a headache, nothing serious. As they set out for their day together, Victor's mind was split between the joy of being with Emma and the looming crisis at the Great American. They visited art galleries in Chelsea, but Victor found himself staring blankly at paintings, his thoughts elsewhere. Every vibration of his phone sent a jolt of anxiety through him, wondering if it was Jack with more bad news. During lunch at a quaint cafe, Emma finally called him out. Alex, what's going on? You've been distracted all day. If you're not feeling well, we can go back to the hotel. Victor sighed, deciding to share a version of the truth. It's work. There's a situation developing. A competitor trying to take over the company. Emma's eyes widened with sympathy. Oh, Alex, that's terrible. Is there anything you can do? I'm not sure, Victor admitted, the weight of his deception heavy on his shoulders. I feel so helpless, being away from it all. Emma reached across the table, squeezing his hand. Her touch sent a warmth through Victor, momentarily cutting through his anxiety. Sometimes a little distance can provide clarity. Maybe being here, away from it all, will help you see a solution you couldn't see before. Her words struck a chord in Victor. She was right. His time as Alex had already shown him so much about his hotels, his business, and himself. Maybe this perspective was exactly what he needed to save the Great American. As they continued their day, Victor found himself studying every interaction, every detail of the city around them, looking for inspiration. He observed how small businesses thrived alongside corporate giants, how neighborhoods maintained their unique character in the face of gentrification. That evening, as they stood on the High Line watching the sunset, Victor felt a renewed sense of purpose. The city sprawled before them, a tapestry of lights and lives intertwined. He turned to Emma, struck once again by her beauty in the fading light. Thank you, he said softly. Emma looked at him quizzically. For what? For reminding me why I do what I do, for helping me see things differently. As Emma smiled up at him, Victor knew he had to fight, not just for his company, but for the vision of hospitality that the Great American represented. A vision of warmth, personality, and genuine human connection. A vision that Emma embodied perfectly. But as they walked back to the hotel, hand in hand, Victor also knew that his deception couldn't last much longer. Sooner or later, he would have to reveal his true identity to Emma. And when he did, he might lose everything he'd gained in these precious days as Alex. Back in his room, Victor spent hours on secure calls with his team, developing strategies to counter Platinum's takeover attempt. He pored over financial reports and legal documents, all while trying to maintain his cover as Alex. As the night wore on, a plan began to take shape in Victor's mind. It was risky, unconventional, and would require him to fundamentally reshape the Great American. But it was also true to the vision his grandfather had started with, and to the insights he'd gained during his time undercover. With a mixture of determination and trepidation, Victor realized that the real battle, for his company, his principles, and possibly his heart, was only just beginning. He would have to draw on everything he'd learned, both as Victor, Canada, and as Alex Mexico, to save the Great American and, perhaps, to become the man he truly wanted to be. As dawn broke over the city, Victor stood at the window of his hotel room, watching the early morning light paint the skyline. He knew that the decisions he made in the coming days would shape not just the future of his company, but the course of his life. And at the center of it all was Emma, the woman who had unwittingly helped him rediscover his passion and purpose. With a deep breath, Victor picked up his phone. It was time to put his plan into action and to face the consequences of his deception. The next morning, Victor woke early, his mind churning with plans to save the Great American. He spent hours on his laptop, firing off emails and making discreet phone calls, all while trying to maintain his cover as Alex. The weight of his dual identities was becoming increasingly difficult to bear, especially with Emma's trusting face constantly in his thoughts. As he worked, he realized that his experiences as a guest had given him unique insights. He began drafting a proposal for a complete overhaul of the Great American's approach to hospitality, focusing on personalized service, local partnerships, and creating genuine connections with guests. It was a risky move, especially with Platinum hotels circling. But Victor was convinced it was the only way to save the soul of his company. A knock on his door startled him out of his focus. He quickly closed his laptop and took a deep breath, before opening the door to find Emma, looking worried. "Alex, I hope I'm not bothering you, but I overheard something I think you should know," she said, her voice low and concerned. Victor's heart raced. Had his cover been blown? "What is it?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Emma glanced down the hallway before continuing. "I was in a meeting with hotel management. They're talking about selling to some big corporation called Platinum Hotels. I know you said your company was facing a takeover, and I thought, well, maybe it's connected." Victor felt the world tilt on its axis. This was it, the moment of truth. He took a deep breath, knowing that what he was about to do could change everything. "Emma, I need to tell you something. Can you come in?" As Emma settled on the edge of the bed, Victor paced the room, gathering his courage. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Victor could hear the faint sounds of the city below, a reminder of the world that existed beyond this moment. "I haven't been entirely honest with you," he began, his voice shaking slightly. "My name isn't Alex Mexico. It's Victor Canada. I'm the CEO of the Great American hotel chain. This hotel, the Grand Dakota, it's mine." Emma's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in confusion and hurt. "What? I don't understand. Why would you—" Victor sat beside her, careful to maintain some distance. "I came here undercover because I felt disconnected from my own hotels, from the guest experience. I needed to see things for myself, to understand what we were doing right and what we were doing wrong." Emma stood abruptly, anger flashing in her eyes. "So this whole time, you've been lying. Our friendship, was any of it real?" "Emma, please," Victor pleaded, standing as well. "Everything I shared with you was true. My feelings, my thoughts, they're all real. I just—" I didn't tell you who I really was. Emma shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. I trusted you, Alex, Victor, whatever your name is. I shared things with you I've never told anyone. And all this time, you were my boss. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? Victor reached out to her, but she stepped back. Emma, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. Meeting you, spending time with you, it's changed everything for me. You've helped me see what really matters. In the hotels, and in my life. Emma wiped her eyes, visibly struggling to process everything. I need time to think. It's too much. As she turned to leave, Victor called out. The takeover threat is real. Platinum Hotels is trying to buy us out. If they succeed, they'll probably dismantle everything, fire most of the staff. I need your help to stop them. Emma paused at the door, her hand on the handle. Without turning back, she said softly, I'll think about it. Then she was gone. Victor collapsed onto the bed, his head in his hands. He'd known this moment would come, but he hadn't anticipated how much it would hurt. He'd jeopardized not only his company, but also the most genuine connection he'd formed in years. As the day wore on, Victor threw himself into his work, fine-tuning his proposal and reaching out to allies. But his thoughts kept drifting to Emma, wondering if he'd lost her trust forever. The room felt oppressively quiet without her presence. Warm, and even the view of the city seemed to have lost some of its luster. That evening, a knock on his door made his heart leap. He opened it to find Emma, her eyes red but her stance determined. I'm still angry with you, she said firmly. But I care about this hotel and the people who work here. If Platinum takes over, a lot of good people will lose their jobs. So, what's your plan? Relief washed over Victor. He stepped aside, inviting her in. Thank you, Emma. Let me show you what I've been working on. As they poured over, Victor's proposals laid into the night, he dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, he hadn't lost everything after all. Emma's insights proved invaluable, her deep understanding of the hotel's operations helping to refine and strengthen Victor's plans. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, Victor looked at Emma, her face etched with concentration as she reviewed a document. He realized that regardless of the outcome with Platinum Hotels, his life had been irrevocably changed by this woman and the experiences they'd shared. Emma, he said softly, causing her to look up. I know I've broken your trust, and I'll spend as long as it takes to earn it back. But I want you to know, these past few days with you have been the most real, the most alive I've felt in years. Whatever happens next, I'm grateful for that. Emma's expression softened slightly, a mix of emotions playing across her face. Let's focus on saving the hotel for now, Victor. The rest, we'll figure that out later. Victor nodded, understanding the implicit second chance she was offering. As they turned back to their work, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The battle for the great American was far from over, but with Emma by his side, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Victor, now operating openly as himself, worked tirelessly, with Emma and a small team of trusted employees to mount a defense against Platinum's takeover attempt. They set up a war room in one of the hotel's conference spaces, walls covered with charts, graphs, and strategy maps. Victor was in his element, his years of business acumen coming to the fore, but now tempered with the insights he'd gained as a guest. He found himself constantly balancing between the big-picture thinking required of a CEO and the ground-level understanding he'd gained during his time as Alex. Emma proved to be an invaluable ally. Her deep understanding of the hotel's day-to-day operations and her connections with staff at all levels provided crucial information and support. She organized focus groups with employees from every department, gathering insights and ideas that would prove critical to their strategy. We need to show the shareholders that our vision for the great American is stronger than Platinum's, Victor explained during a strategy session. It's not just about profits. It's about preserving the soul of these hotels while adapting to the future. Emma nodded, adding, and we need to rally the staff. If we can show a united front, from the CEO to the bellhops, it'll send a powerful message. They worked on a multi-pronged approach, reaching out to shareholders with a compelling growth strategy, mobilizing staff support, and launching a public relations campaign highlighting the Great American's commitment to personalized hospitality and community involvement. Victor found himself energized by the challenge, and by working closely with Emma. Though there was still tension between them, a tentative trust was rebuilding as they fought side by side. He admired her resilience, her ability to set aside her personal feelings to focus on the greater good of the hotel and its employees. As they worked, Victor also grappled with the personal implications of his actions. He'd started this journey, seeking to reconnect with his company, but he'd found so much more. The question now was whether he could integrate the lessons he'd learned as Alex into his life as Victor. The climax came at a crucial shareholder meeting. Victor stood before a packed room, Emma by his side, as he presented their vision for the future of the Great American. The air was thick with tension. Everyone knew that the future of the company hung in the balance. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady and passionate, "the Great American is more than just a collection of buildings. It's a legacy of hospitality, a promise to our guests, and a home to thousands of dedicated employees." He outlined their plan for renewal, investing in staff training, upgrading facilities with a focus on sustainability, and doubling down on the personalized service that had once been their hallmark. But he also spoke of innovation, of adapting to changing traveler needs while maintaining the core values that made the Great American special. "I've spent the past week as a guest in our flagship hotel," Victor revealed, causing a stir in the room. "I've seen firsthand what works and what doesn't, and I can tell you, the heart of the Great American is strong. With your support, we can make it stronger." He went on to detail specific initiatives, a mentorship program to nurture talent within the company, partnerships with local businesses to provide unique experiences for guests, and a complete overhaul of their technological infrastructure to improve both guest experience and operational efficiency. As Victor spoke, he could see the tide turning. Shareholders who had been wavering were now nodding in agreement. Even some of Platinum's representatives looked uncertain, their confident smirks replaced by thoughtful frowns. When the vote finally came, it was decisive. The Great American would remain independent, with a mandate to pursue Victor's vision for renewal. The room erupted in cheers. Victor turned to Emma, swept up in the moment, and without thinking, pulled her into a hug. For a moment, she stiffened, then relaxed into his embrace. "We did it," he whispered. Emma pulled back, meeting his eyes. "You did it, Victor. You fought for what matters." As the celebration continued around them, Victor knew that winning this battle was just the beginning. He had a hotel chain to reinvent, a team to rebuild, and most importantly, Emma's trust to regain. In the days that followed, Victor threw himself into implementing the changes they'd proposed. He moved his office from the corporate headquarters to a small space in the Grand Dakota, determined to stay connected to the day-to-day operations of the hotel. He instituted regular undercover stays at various properties, encouraging other executives to do the same. He held town hall meetings with staff at all levels, actively seeking their input and ideas. Through it all, Emma was by his side, her insight and passion driving many of the changes. Their working relationship deepened, but the personal connection they'd forged during Victor's time as Alex remained complicated. One evening, as they wrapped up a long day of meetings, Victor found the courage to address the elephant in the room. "Emma," he said, his voice soft, "I know things between us are complicated, but I want you to know that what I felt, what I feel, for you, is real. It started when I was Alex, but it's only grown stronger as Victor." Emma was quiet, for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. "I believe you," she finally said. "But trust isn't rebuilt overnight, Victor. It takes time, and more importantly, consistent action." Victor nodded, understanding the challenge before him. "I'm willing to put in that time, Emma, to show you, day by day, that the man you got to know as Alex is still here, just with a different name and a lot more responsibility." A small smile tugged at the corners of Emma's mouth. "Well, then, I guess we've got our work cut out for us, don't we? Both with the hotels and whatever this is between us." As they parted ways that night, Victor felt a sense of hope he hadn't experienced in years. The road ahead would be challenging, both professionally and personally. But for the first time in a long time, he was looking forward to the journey. The great American hotels were changing, evolving into something that honored their past while embracing the future. And Victor, too, was changing, integrating the best parts of Alex into the man he wanted to be, the leader his company needed, and hopefully, the partner Emma deserved. As he looked out over the city from his hotel room, Victor smiled. The adventure he'd started on a whim had turned into the most important journey of his life, and it was only just beginning. 1 year after the shareholder meeting that had saved the great American from Platinum's takeover attempt, Victor stood in the lobby of the Grand Dakota, surveying the subtle but significant changes. The space felt warmer, more welcoming. Staff members moved with purpose and genuine smiles, engaging naturally with guests. The cold corporate atmosphere had been replaced by a sense of warmth and personalized attention. "Impressive, isn't it?" Emma's voice came from behind him. "Hard to believe how much has changed in a year." Victor turned, smiling at the woman who had become his closest confidant and partner in reinventing the great American. "We make a good team," he said softly. After the takeover, threat had been defeated. Victor had offered Emma a promotion to Director of Guest Experience for the entire hotel chain. Together, they had implemented a series of changes across all properties, focusing on staff empowerment, local partnerships, and creating unique, memorable experiences for guests. "The latest guest satisfaction scores are in," Emma said, handing Victor a tablet. "We're up 15% across all properties." Victor nodded, pleased but not surprised. "And staff retention improved by 22%, Emma replied with a grin. "Turns out, people like working for a company that values them. Who knew?" As they walked through the hotel, Victor marveled at how much his perspective had changed. He noticed little things. A bellhop going out of his way to help a guest. A housekeeper taking extra care with a room setup. The concierge sharing insider tips with an excited couple. These small moments of genuine care and attention were now the foundation of the great American's renewed success. They ended up in Victor's office, no longer a sterile, imposing space, but a warm, inviting room with comfortable seating and photos of various great American properties lining the walls. Each photo told a story of the local community and the unique experiences offered at each hotel. "Victor," Emma said as they sat down, "there's something I've been wanting to discuss with you." Victor felt a flutter of nervousness. Despite their close working relationship, there was still an undercurrent of unresolved tension between them. "What is it?" Emma took a deep breath. "I've been offered a position, CEO of a small boutique hotel chain in Vermont." Victor's heart sank. "Oh, Congratulations. That's a fantastic opportunity." "It is," Emma agreed. "But I'm not sure I want to take it." Hope bloomed in Victor's chest. "Why not?" Emma met his eyes. "Because what we're doing here, it matters. And because of you, Victor. This past year, working with you, it's been challenging and frustrating and absolutely wonderful. I'm not ready for it to end." Victor reached across the desk when taking her hand. "Emma, I don't want it to end either. This company, these hotels, they're so much better with you here. I'm so much better with you here." Emma squeezed his hand. "So, partners, for the long haul?" Victor smiled, feeling a sense of rightness settle over him. "Partners, in every way." As they sealed their agreement with a kiss, Victor knew that his journey as Alex Mexico had led him exactly where he needed to be. He had rediscovered his passion for hospitality, reinvented his company, and found a true partner in both work and life. Over the next few months, Victor and Emma's partnership deepened both professionally and personally. They complemented each other perfectly. Victor's big-picture thinking balanced by Emma's attention to detail and deep understanding of day-to-day operations. Together, they launched a series of initiatives that further transformed the Great American, the local flavor program. Each hotel partnered with local artisans, farmers, and businesses to offer unique, location-specific experiences for guests. From farm-to-table dinners in rural properties to street art tours in urban locations, the program showcased the best of each community. The Great American Academy, a comprehensive training program for all employees, focusing not just on job skills, but on emotional intelligence, cultural awareness, and personal development. The academy became a model for the industry, with other hotel chains seeking to emulate its success. The Green Initiative, a company-wide commitment to sustainability, including energy-efficient renovations, waste reduction programs, and partnerships with environmental organizations. The initiative not only reduced costs, but also resonated strongly with environmentally conscious travelers. The Community Connections Project. Each hotel adopted local charities and community projects, encouraging both staff and guests to participate in volunteer activities. This fostered a sense of purpose among employees and created meaningful connections with local communities. As these programs took root, the Great American began to receive recognition not just for its financial success, but for its positive impact on employees, guests, and communities. Industry awards and glowing press coverage followed, but for Victor and Emma, the real reward was seeing their vision come to life. One evening, as they shared a quiet dinner in the Grand Dakota's revamped restaurant, Victor reflected on how far they'd come. "You know," he said, "a year ago, I was sitting in this very restaurant, feeling disconnected and dissatisfied. If someone had told me then where I'd be now, I wouldn't have believed them." Emma smiled, reaching across the table to take his hand. "It's amazing what can happen when you open yourself up to new experiences and perspectives." Victor nodded, thinking back to his time as Alex Mexico. "Well, I came looking for insights into the hotel business, but I found so much more. I found myself, and I found you. We found each other," Emma corrected gently. "And in the process, we found a way to make the Great American truly great, again." As they continued their meal, discussing plans for the future and sharing stories from their day, Victor felt a deep sense of contentment. The Great American hotels were thriving, evolving into something that honored their past while embracing the future. And he, too, had evolved, integrating the best parts of Alex into the man he wanted to be, the leader his company needed, or in the partner Emma deserved. The adventure that had started on a whim had turned into the most important journey of Victor's life. And with Emma by his side, he knew the best was yet to come. 5 years after Victor's undercover adventure, the Grand Dakota stood as a shining example of modern hospitality done right. Victor and Emma, now married, had successfully implemented their vision across the Great American chain, creating a new standard in the industry. As they strolled through the lobby, hand in hand, they overheard a guest commenting to the concierge, "There's just something special about this place. It feels like coming home." Victor squeezed Emma's hand, sharing a smile. They both knew that this feeling of warmth, of genuine care, was the true legacy of the Grand Dakota and the Great American. The hotel had become more than just a place to stay. It was a hub of community engagement and cultural exchange. The lobby, once a mere transitional space, now buzzed with activity. Local artists showcased their work in rotating exhibits, while the newly added coffee shop served as a meeting place for guests and locals alike. Victor and Emma's walk took them past the hotel's new innovation lab, a space where staff members could experiment with new ideas to enhance the guest experience. Through the glass walls, they could see a team brainstorming, their excitement palpable even from a distance. "Remember when we first proposed this?" Emma asked, nodding towards the lab. Victor chuckled. "How could I forget? The board thought we were crazy. A playground for hotel staff, they called it. And now look," Emma said proudly. "Some of our best initiatives have come out of that room." Indeed, the Innovation Lab had spawned numerous successful programs, from a revolutionary mobile app that allowed guests to customize every aspect of their stay to a sustainability initiative that had cut the hotel's carbon footprint by 40% in just 2 years. As they continued their tour, they passed by the bustling kitchen of the Golden Fork restaurant. The head chef, upon seeing them, waved them over excitedly. "Mr. Canada, Mrs. Texas Canada," he greeted them warmly. "I've just finalized the menu for our farm-to-table dinner series. Would you like a preview?" Victor and Emma exchanged glances, both remembering the bland, overpriced meals of years past. Now, the Golden Fork was renowned for its innovative cuisine that celebrated local ingredients and global flavors. As they sampled the chef's creations, Victor marveled at how far they'd come. The restaurant, like the hotel itself, had rediscovered its soul. It wasn't just about luxury anymore. It was about creating meaningful experiences and connections. Their impromptu tasting was interrupted by the arrival of a familiar face. Carlos, the room service waiter Victor had met during his undercover stay. Now the hotel's guest experience manager. Carlos had flourished under the new management style that encouraged creativity and personal growth. "Sorry to interrupt," Carlos said, his confidence a far cry from the guarded young man Victor had first met. But I wanted to let you know that the mentorship program graduation is about to start in the ballroom." Victor and Emma thanked him, promising to be there shortly. As they made their way to the ballroom, Emma turned to Victor. "You know, seeing Carlos always reminds me of how this all started," she said softly. "With you pretending to be someone else." Victor nodded, a mix of emotions playing across his face. "I still feel guilty about that sometimes. Lying to you. To everyone." Emma squeezed his hand. "Maybe it started with a lie, but look at where it led us. Sometimes, Victor, we need to step outside ourselves to see the truth." The ballroom was packed with staff members from all levels of the organization, there to celebrate the latest graduates of the Great Americans Mentorship Program. This initiative, pairing experienced employees with newcomers and high-potential staff, had become a cornerstone of the company's culture. As Victor took the stage to address the gathering, he felt a surge of pride. These faces looking back at him weren't just employees, they were the heart and soul of the Great American. "5 years ago," he began, "I stood in this very room and made a promise. A promise to rebuild the Great American, not just as a successful business, but as a family. A promise to create a company where every employee could grow, where every guest would feel truly welcome, and where we would make a positive impact on every community we serve." He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. "Today, as I look at all of you, I see that promise fulfilled. But more importantly, I see the promise of an even brighter future. Because the Great American isn't just about buildings or balance sheets. It's about people. It's about connections. It's about creating moments that matter." As Victor concluded his speech, the room erupted in applause. Emma joined him on stage, and together they handed out certificates to the program graduates. The pride and joy on the faces of both mentors and mentees was testament to the transformative power of their initiatives. Later that evening, as Victor and Emma prepared to leave for the day, they were stopped by an elderly couple in the lobby. "Excuse me," the woman said, her eyes twinkling. "Are you the owners?" Victor and Emma exchanged glances. "We're part of the management team," Emma replied diplomatically. The woman nodded. "Well, we just wanted to say thank you. We've been coming to the Grand Dakota for over 40 years, and I must say, it's never been better. It feels like the grand old days, but fresher, if you know what I mean." Her husband chimed in. "What she means is, it feels like home again, like family." As the couple walked away, Victor turned to Emma, his eyes misty. "That," he said softly, "is why we do what we do." Emma nodded, her own eyes shining. "It's not just about running hotels, is it? It's about creating a place where people can connect, where they can feel valued and cared for. Whether they're guests or employees," Victor added. As they left the Grand Dakota that night, hand in hand, Victor and Emma knew that their work was far from over. There would always be new challenges, new innovations to implement, new ways to improve. But they also knew that they had built something truly special, a legacy that would endure. The Great American Day, with the Grand Dakota as its flagship, had become more than just a hotel chain. It was a beacon of hospitality in the truest sense of the word, a place where everyone, from the CEO to the newest housekeeper, from the longtime guest to the first-time visitor, felt welcomed, valued, and at home. And for Victor and Emma, that was the greatest success of all. They had not just saved a company, they had rediscovered its heart and soul. In doing so, they had created a legacy that would touch lives for generations to come. As they drove home the lights of the Grand Dakota fading in the rearview mirror. Victor smiled to himself. The journey that had begun with a simple desire to understand his own hotels had led to so much more. It had led to transformation, of his company, of his understanding of hospitality, and of himself. And as he glanced at Emma, her profile, illuminated by the city lights, he knew that the greatest adventure of all was still unfolding, day by day, hand in hand with the woman who had helped him see the world, and himself, anew. The Grand Dakota and the Great American as a whole stood not just as monuments to hospitality, but as testaments to the power of authenticity, connection, and the enduring spirit of true service. It was a legacy that would continue to evolve, to inspire, and to welcome all who crossed its threshold for years to come. What did you think of the story? Leave a comment and a review about this story. If you were moved and enjoyed our work, feel free to help us continue producing. I invite you to click on our link in the first pinned comment. Now, 2 buttons will appear. One to subscribe, if you haven't already, and the other to watch other interesting stories. Choose one. Thank you for watching this far. See you soon.